we have actually seen this film play out before since 1989. Every few years, there's a terror attack inside India, which is almost always tied to a Pakistan-based terror group. There's an escalation in tensions. Since 2016, India has chosen not to restrain itself, but to conduct strikes, whether it's called the surgical strikes of 2016 or the airstrikes of 2019, or the strike that we are seeing currently, which took place. So then Pakistan responds, and normally the international community comes in and de-escalates tensions, and both countries then after a few years have conversations. Then again, the terror attack takes place. So this is a cycle on repeat. And I believe Pakistan will respond. What we need to wait and see is whether Pakistan chooses an escalatory or a de-escalatory. India's strike was de-escalatory. It was punitive. It targeted terror camps. Muridke and Bahawalpur are the headquarters of two Pakistan-based terror groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, that have targeted India for decades. So India chose those terror camps to target. It did not target any Pakistani military or any civilian out.
The Pahalgam attack last month, it exposed shortcomings in India's intelligence and protection of soft targets there. Can you tell me about the pressure that India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been under to act on this?
So the Indian Prime Minister has been under pressure. The challenge was that in 2016, India conducted what it called surgical strikes. It sent its forces across the border to kill terrorists in terrorist camps and came back. Pakistan denied it. A few years later, in 2019, when the terror attack took place, India decided to strike. It crossed Pakistani Kashmir and struck in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Bahawalpur. Pakistan responded. So sort of India's challenge is that the last two times that India used either a surgical or an airstrike and Pakistan responded while the situation de-escalated, terrorism hasn't stopped and terror attacks tied to Pakistan have not stopped. So India's sort of, challenge remains that how does it convince Pakistan or how does it convince the global community to convince Pakistan that it needs to dismantle its terrorist infrastructure? Otherwise, Gemma, the two of us will be having this conversation every few years.
As to that Pahalgam attack, Pakistan denies that it was behind it. What evidence has been put forward?
So the evidence that the Indian side has is that the Resistance Front is an affiliate of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, which are both Pakistan-based groups. However, India doesn't have the kind of public evidence that it had in 2019 or even in 2016. That is true. The second point I'd like to make is 6 days before the attack took place, Pakistan's army chief gave a public speech in which he targeted India not just as an India-Pakistan, but he went back to 1947 partition, spoke about the two-nation theory and he equated India and Pakistan as being Hindus and Muslims who have been fighting for so many years. And he referred to Kashmir as the jugular vein and reiterated support for Indian Kashmir and the brethren over there. So for the Indian side, 6 days before an attack takes place, a Pakistani army chief, for the first time in about 5 decades, publicly targets India on religion-based grounds and expresses support for Kashmir.
And Dr. Pande, when you outlined before that restrained response, as you put it, from India, Pakistan's Defence Minister has spoken. He has denied India's claim that it was targeting terrorist camps, that India was targeting them, and that civilian areas were hit. What do we know to be true of that?
So, I don't believe Pakistan has ever admitted that it has terrorist camps. But sort of, most governments around the world agree, and even the UN Security Council and its report and its committees agree that there are terror safe havens inside Pakistan. And all analysts know where those sort of, what are the headquarters of those terrorist groups. And two of those headquarters are Muridke for the Lashkar-e-Taiba and Bahawalpur for Jaish-e-Mohammed. So the Pakistani side may deny it, but those terror groups are located in those areas. Now, sort of, Is it possible that some civilians also died? Well, that is likely, because these headquarters have mosques. They also have people living there. So the possibility there is a collateral damage there. But India, in sort of targeted those terrorist outfits and their camps. And in the press release, the Indian military has said it is measured, focused, and not escalatory. So India's response was going to be punitive without the desire to escalate.
And you mentioned that cycle before, so you are expecting that Pakistan will retaliate on this and then the international community will step in. Now, we know that before this escalation, the UN Secretary-General, allies of both countries, had urged both Pakistan and India to exercise restraint. So what is that step in them coming in and stop this from spiralling out of control?
So the U.S., the United States, where I am, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of Defense have spoken to their counterparts. And the Secretary of State has asked both countries to de-escalate and work together. I believe many European countries, UK, also the Gulf Arab states, and even China and Russia asked both countries to de-escalate. But I'm sure all of them knew that India would respond. There was no way that the Indian government could absorb such an attack, and yet, sort of be able to stay in power and, sort of retain public support. However, there will be pressure on Pakistan to ensure that its response is limited, and it is symbolic without being escalatory. So somewhere inside Indian administered Kashmir, like it did last time in 2019, so that Pakistan can say that it retaliated, but it did not. But this does not result in an escalation. And I'm sure the Americans, and all their partner countries around the world, including the Russians and Chinese, are speaking to the Indian and Pakistani counterparts and asking them to de-escalate and to prevent the two nuclear-armed countries from moving further up that ladder.